Welcome everyone. This is Ensuring Success 2022. We are so glad you're here with us today. We are starting this session on finding your niche or niche, and we'll discuss how we want to pronounce that later on. But first of all, I want to quickly introduce me and our sponsors and then our panel. So I am Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor Magazine. I would like to thank our sponsors for this event who are making this event possible. They include ADP, Avalara, BotKeeper, CorpayOne, CPA.com, Canopy, Caseware, Field Guide, eFile for Biz, Intuit, Right Networks, SafeSend, Sage, SureLink, TaxFile, TechGuru, Xero, and Zoho. And I would particularly like to thank Xero, who is the sponsor for this session right here, the one that you're in right now. I'd also like to mention that on the bottom of your screen, there's an Ask a Question box at any time. If you have any questions for our speakers, you can enter them there. If you're having any difficulty viewing the event, you can enter a comment about that, and our tech people are on call waiting to help you if you need help. Or if you have any comments about the topic we're discussing, feel free to share that as well. I'd like to quickly introduce our speakers for this session, and they include Liz Mason, Claire Van Holland, Paul Lewis, and I'm joined also by Alexandra DeFelice, and I'll have each of you introduce yourselves real quickly.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Liz Mason. I am the CEO and founder of High Rock Accounting as well as Rebel Rock Accounting. We do everything from bookkeeping all the way to CFO services. We have close to 40 people on our team all over the country and a few internationally. And we've focused very heavily on different niches, and that's how we've built our whole business. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Hi, my name is Claire Van Holland. I am the CEO and founder of the CV Ledger. I've had my boutique accountancy now for about 6 years, and we're a small shop. We focus primarily on working with creative folks, and even more so lately, branding and marketing agencies specifically. So I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, I'm Paul Lewis. I'm the Director of Verticals and Franchise for the U.S. for Xero. I've spent the first decade or so of my career in enterprise IT architecture working with firms and customers on really complex deployments and enterprise situations, and have spent the last 4 years in the accounting space working with firms to really transform the way that they do business. We have a team in the U.S. that works with firms of all shapes and sizes in an effort to help them really transform the way they use technology in their practice.
All right, Alexandra.
And I'm Alexandra DeFelice, Director of Marketing and Business Development for Pain and Fears, a law firm in Southern California, and I'm here to co-moderate all the sessions for today and tomorrow with Gail.
All right, thanks everyone. Okay, let's start off with, let's actually start off with defining what we mean by niche or niche, and we're going to use those pronunciations interchangeably, so look for them both during the session. But anyway, what do we mean by a niche practice?
So for me, I get a little frustrated with this because when you talk to accountants, they're generally like, I have to focus on one industry. And to me, that is one way to figure out a niche, but it's not the only way, right? So you can focus on an industry, you can focus on a size of company inside of that industry, or a sub-industry inside of there, or a type of founder, or how many employees they have, or the type of tech stack they're using, and it can go on and on and on, but there are so many different identifying qualifications of what a business is and how to define it that you can really pick a niche in whatever you want. Like you could pick a niche in women entrepreneurs over 50. Great. Awesome. What does that look like for you, right? And for us, we have focused on industries, but we've also focused on what that means inside of that industry because there's so much and it's so broad.
Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, no, I think to Liz's point, really focusing on, for us at least, client size became pretty apparent for us early on. There was a very specific type of clientele that we were attracting, and we just continued to expound on that, where it was like, if they don't fit this profile of size and, just even with revenue, of course, but then even more so, what type of creative that is, segmented and segmented. That was something that over time and in the last 6 years, we've been able to just really key in on, which has affected sort of our supply chain management and delivery to clients, and really kind of improving upon relationships. So.
Nice. Paul, what about beyond the vertical niches? What else is there that folks specialize in?
Well, I think there's quite a bit that technology can enable today, and I think the issue that you may run into running a practice is the opportunity to become, as Liz said, a little too narrow-minded about what it means to become a expert in a particular niche or niche. And I think there's so many different things, whether you're going to focus vertically into something like construction or real estate, or focusing on a particular workflow, that you can partner with the technology companies that you're working with, or that would service that particular workflow.
What do you mean by a particular workflow?
Well, so things like taxes or compliance. Construction is a big vertical for Xero, and things like cost segregation becomes something that most people aren't going to worry about, but is a very big issue as a workflow for construction-specific customers. And so understanding how to partner with technology to deliver that service to your customers becomes very critical for us.
Yeah. And as you dive deeper into defining what that looks like, you figure out who you need to talk to and where to build those relationships, whether that be with software vendors or whether that be with industry-specific events or people, as well as the size of the company. As Claire mentioned, if you're broad-based, you're not going to be able to figure out the supply chain very well, or what you should do and how to do it the best. But if you're very focused on, and what type of creatives are you focused on?
At this point, it has evolved into brand and marketing agencies.
Okay. And what size are they?
I mean, they're usually between 3 to 5 employees big, maybe a little bit bigger than that, but usually not too much.
But the fact that she can answer those questions right off the bat without any hesitation means that she's defined this down into a very specific subset of the market that you otherwise were serving.
Yeah. Most of whom because branding and marketing agencies, just for example, gets to be a very broad category in and of itself. So what does that mean? Because there's a lot of different meanings to that. There could be graphic designers, or could be photographers, or could be video editing, or sort of maybe like all in one, right? And so with that, understanding the way in which they work with their clients, to Liz's and to Paul's point, helps identify what kind of tech stack we start to build for our clients, and having everything so templated and so automated to the point where you just do it without thinking, which is amazing, because then it enables more time and space for really fostering and nurturing the client relationship, being able to speak so well to every single aspect of their business that the rigmarole of all the technical things that might come up has already been figured out. And so at this point, and the intention with my team at least, is to really just build upon the relationship and create something deeper and more sustainable for the longer term.
So that kind of leads us to a discussion about the benefits of focusing on a particular niche. Besides the fact that you can create a tech stack that works for that group and specialize in that and understand it inside out, what other benefits are there? If you're talking to someone who's kind of a general practitioner, I take any client who walks in the door, and they're thinking about focusing on a certain niche, what would make it worthwhile for them to do that?
Yeah, so when I started HighRock in 2013, like the very end of 2013, I was, fresh out of big public accounting firms and I can do anything, right? Throw me anything. And I got this client that was a $20 million top line revenue construction client that was running their entire operation on Excel. And I had to figure out all the systems, processes, get them in order. They didn't even have AP. They basically just waited for someone to come with a bat to their freaking office and ask for money, and that was really uncomfortable. So I figured all of that out, and then I realized I don't like working in construction. as it turns out, that's not the industry that I love, right? And I didn't like that size client, right? It was not fun at all. So went back to the drawing board and realized my passion was in technology. It always has been. I love it. Like, I've coded things, I've automated things, I've done that since I was a little kid, basically because I'm lazy, right? And I started focusing in on the tech sector, and I started going to networking events in technology and like Startup Week and, you know, like little hackathon events. And I built this really great practice centered around these technology companies that not only understood where tech was going from accounting, they understood like what I loved about it. I understood their business. I was able to answer their questions about burn rates and waterfalls and all the specific things that end up happening from investor-backed businesses, and further defined that down. And once I did that, the business went from growing, you know, the traditional 5 to 10% to growing 110% a year. And so we've kind of modeled each of the new industries we approach after that, and we niche it down to a very specific client profile, and that's what we focus on.
The thing I love about that is that it, I think, embodies just how human you have to be to approach this market. And you want to make sure you're avoiding that trap of thinking that this is a business and that you have to be somebody different than who you are in order to succeed. You can get into a market and understand that this isn't for me. I don't really enjoy this clientele. And when you don't enjoy what you're doing, the passion that you bring to that, the expertise and intentionality that you bring to that, really, you're not able to bring that same level. And so understanding your preferences, understanding the opportunity to build expertise in any given field and to follow your passions, whether it be video games or Legos or construction or, you know, whatever that might be that is actually your passion. To be able to drive that and find expertise there where your services as an accountant are valuable, I think is where you find that sweet spot.
I want to meet the accountant focusing on Legos.
Right?
Yes.
They're out there.
Cool. It's got to be hard because, you know, we talked about in session 1 about firing your clients. Like, people get nervous, right? So if you find yourself like, oh my God, I have all these dentists or construction clients or whatever, but I don't want them, how do you wean yourself of that?
You show up to events and you meet the person that wants that.
Yeah.
You put yourself in all of the places where your target clients may or may not be, whether that's directories or, you know, different referential like newsletters. I mean, that was kind of how I got embedded into the creative communities, was just putting myself everywhere there, only there. And it kind of just grew because there wasn't very many people at the time focused on that. I really like Paul's point about intentionality, because I think that as accountants, and one of the things that I have seen, especially with so many colleagues, and maybe Liz can probably agree with me on this, is that it is easy to say yes, and it is easy to make all the money in the world, and we know it, and some of us already do. The harder thing is to say no, and the harder thing, even more so, is to say no to money, but really find that road, that path of what is it that's going to bring happiness and support a lifestyle that I love without burning out, because that's very easy to do in this industry, and there's always more than enough work to kind of go around. And so what I have found is it's an easier thing, at least in my end, you know, and for my story, to do a slow growth and be completely intentional with who we're working with, how we're working with them, what does that really look like, and what that has allowed my firm at least to do in the last 6 years is to just, similar to Liz, really find those little pockets to focus on and be so intentional so that, again, it becomes more of like a relationship business, which is not something that is very common in the world of accounting, but it is a relationship business, and it hasn't been in the past, and this is where I strongly feel that that is something that needs to change. And every single one of us who are in these positions have the ability to do, you know, to really do that and to sort of unfold that for our clients, which ultimately, to me, translates to long-term sustainability and happier lives for everyone.
And it's interesting that you bring up, that we're kind of returning into a relationship-based business because we are professional services, right? And that industry has a very long history, right? But when you look at it through the last, let's say, 100 years, it was extremely relationship-based. And then the second we started getting a lot of automation and a lot of tools and technology behind it, the relationship piece of it kind of fell away because people could start doing this stuff themselves. And they didn't see the value in what we could bring. And now as we have people going from, more of a like hyper-local practice type to a national practice, we're able to focus in on these niches in a way that we haven't been able to before, and in a way that brings so much more value because you're able to say, I know this industry inside and out. I've seen it 100 times. I know it like the back of my hand. I have instincts in this industry. If I look at a dashboard for a second, I can tell you what's right, what's wrong, what should be, what your metrics need to be, how you need to measure them, and how to be successful. And that's not happened as well as it should in the past. And I think a lot of it had to do with geographic limitations, software limitations, people not understanding the value that we as professional advisors can bring to the table, and that's really unfortunate. So I completely agree with you that we're kind of reverting back into that relationship based, and if you don't have a very solid background and understanding and inside out knowledge of what you're focused on, you can't help your clients as well as somebody that does.
And just focusing on industry, because that's the low-hanging fruit, right? Like clients, I've seen lots of surveys like this, both in my accounting past and in my legal professional current life, is that they want you to understand their business, right? Whether it's the industry or the size or what it is. But industry in particular, there's a lot of jargon. We're using a lot of jargon today, as you all know, right? So, that's taking extra time, especially if you're billing by the hour, where you have to wait, what is this acronym that you're talking about? What is this process that you go through? And you're having to ask them all these questions, and it's frustrating. Versus if you're throwing out the acronyms of their business, just like we do it in the accounting profession, they're like, oh my God, they totally get me, right? So I think that makes a huge difference. And then a comment from the audience, and I love to share things like this, is somebody wrote, find your passion and afterwards work is not work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
100%.
That's quotable. We could put that, on a beautiful picture on Instagram and get 1 million likes.
Yeah. So, and I just wanted to share the survey result in terms of, we asked the question about whether people, and it's unfortunate because I can't show you guys, but the audience will see the results, but I will verbally tell you the answer here, is that whether the audience has a niche, yes, no, or considering it. So yes, 34%, no, 48%, and no, but considering it is 18.6. And then, so this is interesting. I just say, what is the niche based on what you guys just said? And industry was 35.7, size 10.5, tech type they use is 2.8, type of work such as cost segregation is 16.8, and then 34% said other. So what could the others be?
I can answer that question right after we post our first CPE code for this session. All right. There's a code on the bottom of your screen. You want to make sure to record this code if you're planning on collecting CPE credit for this session. There will be 2 more codes later on in the session. Taking all those 3 codes together, you'll go to the Get My CPE option at the top of your screen later today or tomorrow or whenever you want to do it, and enter those codes, and then you'll be able to download your certificate for this session. Okay, and in terms of what other options there are for types of niches, I have a little list here. It can include particular services, including like payroll or estate tax or multi-state tax. It can be size of a firm. It can be just Schedule C businesses. It can be not-for-profit businesses. It can be geographic. It can also be a practice management niche, which would be more like what you're specializing in, you personally within your firm. Like maybe you're focused on the firm's marketing, or you're focused on HR or retirement planning or something within your firm. So there are lots of different areas where people could create their niche. But let's talk about, how do you determine what your niche might be? How do you pick a niche? You've got a practice that's general at the moment. How do you go down the path of determining you want to specialize?
Well, I mean, I think you just answered it. It's your passion, right? Like, if you are passionate about it, you will be more successful in it because it doesn't feel like work anymore. And so I think, if you have an existing book of business and you're going, okay, so now I feel like I should focus in on something, figure out what you like. Like, who are the clients you like and what is the profile of them? Where do you work best? Is it, a very traditional industry where you feel like you understand it? Or is it an emerging industry where you have to figure everything out, right? And how do you, expound upon your already existing knowledge and your already existing client book? But I think the answer changes if you're just starting a practice. And if you have no idea, experiment, go work with some people in those industries and see, if it truly is a passion for you. You might get in with creatives and be like, oh, I really don't like the way that they work. Like, it is much different than, say, a tech startup that's very predictable on, their needs are going to be all the time, constant, and they're going to be extremely responsive because they have investors breathing down their neck, whereas a creative might disappear for a month or two.
Sure. I mean, and what I found especially, within creatives is there's so many different levels of it, right? And so I learned that quickly. I learned very quickly who I didn't want to work with. And that was, if you're starting a new practice and you're just saying yes, you're going to need to go through the mud a little bit with some clients and whatnot. But very quickly you'll know, oh yeah, this is not who I want to work with. And the ones for me that I was like, nope, this is just not going to be a relationship that's sustainable, are the ones who kind of just drop off, or they're so exceptionally creative and they don't have a buffer between that very, very creative visionary and like some kind of business manager, organized person to help pull whatever things are needed. And I was like, if that doesn't exist in the mix, then this isn't a relationship that's going to sustain. And, again, very specific, but understanding who and how you want to work with somebody and what is that dynamic. On paper, it could look perfect. They've got this, this, and this, but then when you actually get into brass tacks of working together, it might not be a fit, right? And that's something that we should also be cognizant of, because it doesn't necessarily mean that that's not your niche. Maybe it's just a personality thing, and that's okay. There's always going to be someone for somewhere, for everyone somewhere.
Well, and I'd like to play devil's advocate for just a second, because I think it's easy, I think of runners, for example. I know several runners. I'm not a runner. So when it comes to running and I ask them, how do I get into running? They say, well, just get out and run, right? So for passionate people who have already established themselves in a niche, it's really easy to say, well, you got to just find your passion for business. And I have to imagine there's a good number of accountants out there that are running firms because they're really good at running firms or really good at having a practice, and their passion may not be accounting. They just found themselves in that career. And how do you build yourself into a niche and find a place where you can develop something like that when you wake up in the morning and you're like, well, I guess I'm going to go do that job that pays me a lot of money, but it's not my passion, right? My passion might lie in other areas. Or maybe I don't have a passion. Maybe my passion is something that I can't monetize. Maybe it's a family or something along those lines.
Excel.
My passion's Excel. I just love formulas, right? How do I monetize that into a niche? I think technology comes. No, my point is just that I think it's really. Liz touched on several things that were. We say passion and then we talk about things like getting deep industry knowledge. You can do that without a passion, right? You can become an expert in a field that you find highly relevant. And I find that with a number of the firms that we work with, if you did an analysis of your customer base, if you were to find a commonality in the types of customers you're currently serving, if you are a general practice that doesn't have a particular niche, I guarantee that there are niches that you are currently servicing that you're not aware of. That there are 60% of your business that has a particular set of needs. And once you've done that analysis and understand that there's this segment that you can service, do some homework, attend events, get yourself involved in more of what their world might be. Because I want to just go back to Liz's point about the timeline. I think it's so relevant. The timeline between relationship to technology and back to relationship. Because we used to go to your neighbor who was really smart and had an accounting practice, And you were just like, accounting.
Do the things.
Thank you. Small business owners today do the exact same thing. I think we're selfish in nature and we want to do the exact same thing. We want an expert, but instead of going to our neighbor, we go to our computer and you say, expert, do my accounting. And so you want people to, and this is really the upskill that we work every day with firms to develop, is becoming an expert in whatever it is that you do so customers can develop that trust. Your clientele want to trust you, and if you have their business today, they want to trust you. They're already trusting you with a portion of what they do, and more often than not, there's a large segment of what you could be doing for them if you just put in a little bit more grease work to kind of put them in a group and understand how to become a deeper expert in that way.
So I'm going to dig into something you said, doing the analysis of commonalities, right? So, this is where like the data analytics nerd in me gets excited because you can categorize things that you do, right? And you can look at it by numbers, you can look at it by efficiency, you can look at it, in any number of directions, but most firms still track how many hours they spend on certain jobs, right? Mm-hmm. Which is in some ways completely outdated, but in other ways useful information, right? And so, I was recently coaching an owner of a tax practice, and she was like, I feel burnt out all the time. I'm working like 1 million hours. I make good money. I love my clients, but something's got to give. And I was like, okay, let's do this analysis. Let's dig into what you're actually doing. And so we started like digging in and looking at it, and we figured out where she was most efficient and effective was LLCs that filed as partnerships with owners that she also filed those returns. And so we started digging into it. And we're like, why are you so much better at that than you are at C corporations? And she was like, I don't know, the C corp forms have all these things. I checked them like 75 times. I'm just not confident with it. Like I file so many more LLCs. Like I understand the partnership forms. I am just really confident. And then we started digging in further. I was like, okay, what's your process? And it turns out her process for LLC flow throughs into individuals was very streamlined and very automated, and nothing else in her practice was. If she had an individual without an LLC, data collection was totally different than if she had individual owning an LLC. And I go into this story to say, we figured out her niche was 2 owner LLCs. That's it. And so she systematically referred out the rest of the business and started focusing on that. And by the next year, she wasn't burnt out all the time. She wasn't confused or frustrated by new tax laws outside of the things that she cared about. And it didn't really matter what industry those LLCs were in. That's what she focused on. And she did an excellent job at it. And it really transformed the way that she felt about work, because it wasn't showing up to something new every day and being outside her comfort zone, which we all know accountants, like, we love our comfort zone. And granted, like, there are times it's absolutely necessary to push yourself out of that, but there are also times it's absolutely necessary to protect that. Mm-hmm. And if you're feeling burnt out in that mode of, you're over stimulated and learning too many different things in too many different places, it might be because you don't have that niche focused and figured out.
Love that.
I think we have to pause right here.
Yep, let's do a quick break. We want to hear a word from our sponsor, Xero, and then we'll be back with your second CPE code for this session.
Accountants today face many challenges. Thankfully, Xero's cloud-based accounting software offers solutions.
I'm constantly straining my eyes having to match my bank account statement numbers with my accounting system.
With bank reconciliation, you match bank statement lines to existing transactions in Xero. If a transaction doesn't exist yet, easily create them on the fly during the reconciliation process. Happy?
Very.
It's accounting made easy.
All right, we are back, and on the bottom of your screen, you should see the second CPE code for this session.
I want to ring the bell.
So be sure to record this, and there will be one additional CPE code before the end of the session. You'll need all 3 of the codes in order to get your certificate for this session. So let's talk a little bit more about you've chosen a niche, an area where either it's a type of work that you're doing or a type of company that you're working for, or a type of clients that you're looking for. How do you get more entrenched? What kind of training do you need? How do you go out and just become known as the expert in that area?
So our go-to-market strategy has been all about niches for 6+ years at this point. And a few years ago, we found ourselves doing a few businesses ancillary to the cannabis business, like a tech company that was focused in on that business, and we had services as another one of our niches. We had a service company that was servicing some grow houses in different ways, and we turned around and we're like, you know what? They need help. They need serious help in this industry. And so we're like, okay, let's go all in. Now, it was very much still emerging at that point, difficult in terms of legality situations, considering federal and state. There's different ways that you have to track things for tax write-offs. There's, a big lack of technology servicing that industry because it's so new. There were all of these complications and issues. And so we basically dove headfirst into it, started going to the industry events, talking to the industry people, figuring out what software vendors were in that space, and then kind of getting as much knowledge as we could from them and figuring out, everyone we could leverage in that network and building relationships with other service providers. We built really great relationships with law firms. We built relationships with the state chartered banks that were working with the cannabis companies. We went around the industry, and then we started kind of diving into it. And you can really mess it up when you go into a new industry, really royally mess it up. And one of the things we learned was a lot of dispensaries don't have any way to track their cash. So cash comes in because you can't use a charge card. So cash comes in, very, very heavy cash business, and they have a vault. And the first dispensary tour I did, and I had a background in casino auditing, and so very much was, focused in on cash controls. How do we make sure nobody's stealing? And I go in, and they have, the controller's office with a light switch on the inside with a camera there who's supposed to be counting the cash, and the monitoring screen for the camera is also in that office. It doesn't quite make sense. And there's just so many issues there and so many risks, and it's overwhelming, extremely overwhelming. And so, we're like, how are you guys tracking cash? In a handwritten composition notebook, line by line, never reconciles. There's always write-offs because you don't know where it is. So that was, obstacle number one that is still an obstacle in that industry. But it's really interesting to figure out, certain software vendors don't support the industry, right? I know Xero does. And so we, started switching our clients over to Xero because we knew they weren't going to get turned off randomly, right? And so there's all these ins and outs and specifics inside of an industry once you get in that you figure out, and you can mess up so many things, like not tracking a cash vault and then having to come back at your end and going, okay, what happened, guys?
Well, and I think what you're referring to is a very important process that I look to in really any of these types of situations where you want to get deep, and that's become a problem solver, right? I think you really, once you start to understand an industry, you can get into it and understand what are the problems in this industry, and then can I solve that? Can I get really creative with what I have and the tools that I have to either be a problem solver or a solution maker where I bring other people together to help try to solve this problem through a network of people. And once you're that source of solving a common problem, I think it becomes much easier to dive in on any particular issue, whether it's LLCs or a vertical niche or something along those lines. You become somebody that people look to as an expert pretty quickly when you understand what the core problems are of that particular set of issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things we learned was we need an internal bookkeeper at all of our clients. We're not going to do that work because there's cash on hand on site, and people need to be recording that and counting it and tracking it and depositing it in the bank. And we're not going to do that. We're a virtual firm, right? We're not going to show up every day to our clients, and most of our clients are multi-state operators, so they're all over the country. We can't physically do it, so we need that level of support to be able to do the advisory that we're really good at. But on our other clients, on our tech clients, we do all the bookkeeping, and I don't want them to have an internal bookkeeper because normally I'm fixing it.
Now, Claire, you're focused on creative people and in particular branding firms. How do you immerse yourself in that business so that you are the expert?
Honestly, it is. I've been very fortunate being one of the few folks who really focus on creatives. They have all found me via SEO. And that was a very, very fortunate, lucky thing for me. That's not necessarily always the case for other industries, I understand. But even more so, and besides that, it honestly was putting myself in some of the emerging places that creatives were starting to congregate online. It's something as simple as like being on the right newsletters, being in the right directories, being in the right networking groups. I plugged myself in all of those places, whether it was like a Facebook group or, just some sort of digital directory for creatives. And I'm usually almost always the only accountant on those. So do I get all of the leads? 100%, because it's such a strange thing for an accountant to just be randomly listed in this directory of creatives. And then even further and just more personally, I am a creative person, so I did have some advantage ahead of time already being somewhat entrenched within the community and kind of knowing where all the little places were to start showing up. So that really helped, right? But I would say, go, to Liz's point, go to the events. There are so many places digitally, in person, that we can plant ourselves in, and to just ask what the needs are, where the gaps are, starts a conversation, and that has really helped. Because the one thing that I really ran into, and I think most folks who run an accountancy, is that the lack of reliable help or consultative help, that is deep, is difficult. I found that over and over and over again, within the creative space. And so to be that person, through and through, and to really show up and be able to speak to the specific industries, branding and marketing being kind of like a newer one, right, was really helpful.
So what kind of staffing issues can arise when you've created a practice that's focused on a niche and you're looking to expand that in terms of your own growth? Do you start with people who are just generalists and try and mold them to fit, or are there ways that you can find people to work with you who already are also practicing in that area?
It depends. For us, the differences in the industries that we service are so vast that we try to focus when we're hiring somebody of a manager level or above, so a true client advisor. We try to focus on people that have had experience in that industry before. Now that's possible for all of our traditional industries. It is impossible for our cannabis practice, right? There are so many new cannabis businesses vying for that talent that for every one person that has 1 year of cannabis experience, there's like 8 jobs. And so to get those people is extremely difficult. We've been lucky and we've gotten a few of them, but we've also made the decision that we're going to grow them ourselves. So we hire really smart people that have relevant related experience, whether it be, in farming, in processing, in some kind of retail trade, that they understand inventory, they understand kind of the workflow of what that looks like before they come in, and then we teach them the industry. And probably our most successful client advisor on our team from the cannabis industry perspective came out of pharmacy. And while pharmacy is nothing like cannabis, as it turns out, you would think there's a little more overlap. There's not. He quickly learned the industry and was able to show up and really engross himself in it in a way that he was able to provide a ton of value to clients and bring that more traditional pharmacy background and some of the things they've done on that side to our client base on this side. So. But staffing's hard. Hiring is hard.
Okay.
Yeah. Similarly, we've hired generalists. Just the way that I run the firm, there's very specific things that I want, especially being such a small shop. And so how people work with clients or not has been very important to me since day one. And so I'm always of the mind where I just prefer to mold them, knowing that they already have the inherent skills required, for the baseline. So.
And let's talk a little bit about technology. If you're focusing on a niche and you want to find out what software there is that you can incorporate into your business or help your clients incorporate it into their businesses, how do you start? How do you find the technology that's going to be appropriate for a small sort of customized practice?
Well, I think you have to start. I'll take that one. 'Cause,
As you should.
yeah, I think you have to start at the core of what the issue is. So, and that's one of the reasons that Xero is such an interesting company to work for and to be a part of, is that they're really, from an accounting standpoint, the core of where I would start as an accountant. You want to go to the core, and then you want to understand, okay, where is it that you would lead me and that I could partner with you to be able to really get support from at a human level. Maybe I'm not an expert, but I want to go service a particular construction set of customers. What technologies do you have? How can you help me develop a relationship with these firms? How can I use this technology to really better help my customers? Ask a lot of questions. Xero is a company that's very much willing to partner deeply with firms to help them be successful. It's really unique in the value prop that we offer to the industry. And I think you see it in the relationships that we have with the firms that are with Xero. And we see technology as absolutely central. So being on a platform at the core of things, and then your customers are going to use a wide breadth of different technologies to service whatever industry that they're in. And being able to kind of allow that core platform technology choice to kind of guide you towards where you want to go, I think is where I would start.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think starting with your general ledger program, or if you're in a different niche, start with your core tax program. Figure out what integrates with that, how that integrates, and how it affects the processes and workflows to really help those clients that you're working with. And I think figuring out what core general ledger works best for your industry if you're in CAS or client accounting services, do that first and then go talk to those people, right? And they'll probably have other firms that have done that they might be able to, introduce you to and say, hey, like, here's a resource to ask questions, because, we're more in a collaborative world than we've ever been. And I think that there's more work than any of us individually can service, and having those relationships means a ton.
All right, well, speaking of being collaborative, when you're trying to expand your niche and grow your client base, and I'm sure once you're in an area that you're focused in, you probably get a lot of word of mouth recommendations because people go to their colleagues in that same area and say, oh, I've got the accountant who's the specialist in this area. But beyond that, what are some ways that once a firm has decided they want to focus on a niche and they've created a tech stack that they think is appropriate for that group, and they have some clients already in that area, how can they go about expanding and featuring themselves in a particular profession that they want to serve?
I think Claire's answered that in a roundabout way, but even she's listed in creative directories as an accountant.
Yeah.
Like, how did you do that?
Honestly, so sidebar, my husband runs a furniture company, custom, and so through that, he was kind of already tapped into some of the communities locally, and it was just similar, word of mouth, just being at places at the right time, seeing what events are out there. And it's very easy to find this stuff online, and then find the in-person extensions of those events, and they want to talk about it. It's so being able to just entrench again in the places where your niche is, where our partnership LLC folks, sort of congregating. And while that is much more broad than creatives per se, there are places. And even if it's a little bit further away from what might initially feel like the place to be, start somewhere, and it always opens a door, is how I feel. And that's what it's been.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for advice, on how to really take those next couple steps, I think the commonality is you really ask questions and make it your job to solve that problem. I'll go back to problem solving. It can't be something that is in the back of your head. It can't be something that you think about at the end of your day that's already booked. You have to book time in your calendar every morning to make sure that you're asking and learning the right questions and intentionally trying to solve that problem of taking those steps to get deeper than you already are in whatever it is that you want to get into. Whether it's directories, I'm going to set aside 30 minutes and all I'm going to do is Google names of directories, or look for, maybe send an email to your customers to ask them where are they finding technology solutions. Asking the right questions and being very inquisitive, and then making that your problem to solve, making that the thing that you focus on every day until it's solved.
Or ask to tag along. That's a thing that I did a lot was, I talked to my clients and be like, hey, what conferences are you going to this year? And they'd, lay it out and be like, can I come? They're like, what? And like, as part of your team, as an extension of your team, I'm functioning as your CFO. Is it possible that I could come with you? And they would kind of look at me like I was weird, but generally said yes. And then I was able to entrench myself and meet more people.
What about writing, speaking, any opportunities to reach out through trade magazines, websites?
100%.
Yeah.
I would recommend anyone that has a penchant for that at all should do it, right?
Okay.
Like if you're in an industry, if you're in a specific niche, even if it's partnership returns, that's what you're focusing on, write about it. What are you doing differently? What are you thinking about? What are you talking to your clients about? And I think a really easy place to get blog post ideas is to call your clients and say, hey, what keeps you up at night? Just write a list of the things they're worried about and then use those as the headlines, because that's what all the clients in that space are probably going to be worried about. It's pretty consistent, right?
Or even just think about the most common questions that you're getting, right? You can say like 5 common questions about XYZ, and they're actually questions that you're getting. And it saves you time. I mean, that's like a lot of times when we try to think about writing a client alert, it's based on the, oh my God, Alexandra, I got 10 questions from clients today on the same exact question. Can we please put out something answering this question, right? So it's kind of free advice for a little bit, but hopefully they'll see you as an expert as a result. So.
Well, and that's the whole goal, right? Is to position yourself as an expert in the niche you're in and to truly become that and own that space. And so if you're able to speak about it or write about it, do it 100%.
Okay, we're going to take another quick break for another message from our sponsor, Xero, and then we'll be back with your final CPE code for this session.
Accountants today face many challenges. Thankfully, Xero's cloud-based accounting software offers solutions.
Don't get me wrong, I love my job, but I am constantly having to fix incorrectly coded transactions made by clients.
Just use Find and Recode. You can save time by searching for and updating multiple transaction line items at once.
Problem solved. Beautiful.
All right, we are back, and I'd like to present our third CPE code for this session. Bell.
Where's the ding?
Sorry, I should have given you the bell.
All right, be sure to record this. This is the third code you need in order to claim CPE credit for this session. Paul, why don't you just ask that question again that you asked during our break?
Well, so not having run a firm, I asked our experts here if they've ever shadowed a client and how valuable that would be to learn what you don't know about what they do.
Yeah, and so in answering Paul, we do that in different industries in different ways. But the most fun is absolutely on our cannabis practice, and we force everyone that comes into that practice to go through a dispensary tour and a grow house tour, and really like seeing start to finish, seed to sale, what happens with the product and how it goes through it, and it is absolutely eye-opening. It changes the way you perceive the industry, and it changes like understanding of even like financial transactions, right? Because like I mentioned earlier, you have a giant cash log. Well, what's going on with that cash? You can literally watch the controller at any dispensary like fill up bags of money and pay people coming in with product for, the store. And how does that work? And what does that look like? And how do they get to those numbers? And what's the documentation behind it? And what kind of paper is going back and forth? And is it digital? Is it not? All of that affects what we do on a day-to-day basis. And without actually touring that and feeling it and doing it firsthand, it's very difficult to conceptualize it for people. And so we find that makes a giant difference in terms of development and training.
So I'm going to ask both Claire and Liz this question because you're in niche practices yourselves. Where was the threshold where you felt the confidence that you needed to say, I am an expert in this?
I'll let you go first on that one.
It took a handful of years, honestly. It was a lot of trial and error and just saying yes to all the things and then realizing, oh no, these are the things I start saying no to, right? But it was also, I think as well for me, sort of just a veer into, oh, this is who I'm attracting. I didn't realize I was putting that out there, I guess, but I was always just saying yes and yes and yes to things that felt, to clients that felt right, situations that felt right. And over time, that almost in some way kind of shaped itself. And when I did sort of the deep dive on my own firm and looked at the profiles of everybody I had worked with up until that point, it was like, oh no, this is a really specific model and profile of types of clients that I work with, and so it is. And so if that's unknown, my recommendation, again, back to what, echoing what Paul said earlier, is just do the deep dive. See who it is that you've enjoyed working with, and how do you start saying yes to more of that to make your life easier.
So I don't think I've had a threshold where I can say I'm an expert at this. I am of the opinion that the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And so I'm always sitting here going, I'm never an expert. I know a lot. I know more than other people. And I know that my firm does a better job in these specific niches that we focus in than other firms that are either generalists. And there are definitely firms that focus on the same niches that are better for certain clients that we refer out to all the time, and we build those networks to make sure that if we're taking on a client, we're the best for them, and we're going to do the best for them. And have the confidence to say, like, we're better, we're marginally better, but we're better, right? But I would never say expert.
Okay.
The thing I love about those responses is that an expert knows what is and what isn't, right? Liz knows and Claire knows when they have a customer that meets their needs, a client that fits their profile that they can service, they say yes. And when they don't, they know where to send them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what an expert is. I think that's what a customer, like as a buyer, that's what you want. I want to ask Liz a question and have her tell me, yes, I can help you, or no, but they can, and I know who they are.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for an outstanding panel. We hope you all enjoyed this and are prepared to start thinking more seriously about creating a niche practice within your own firm. We are going to take a quick break. First, I want to again thank Xero for sponsoring this session, and thank Liz and Claire and Paul for sharing their insights, and Alexandra for fielding our questions and doing our polls and helping all around. We will be back at the top of the hour, and you'll want to make sure you catch this next session on multi-state and remote worker tax issues post-COVID. We'll see you at the top of the hour.